Good morning to all of you. Myself, Ramakrishnaya, course coordinator. I'm working in the Department of Civil Engineering. It's our tradition, before we start the actual program, it's our tradition to pray Almighty for the blessings. I request our first year MTech Environmental Engineering student, Mr. Srinidhi, to render invocation.
महागणपतिं मनसा स्मरामि महागणपतिं मनसा स्मरामि महागणपतिं मनसा स्मरामि वसिष्ठवामदेवादिवन्दितमहागणपतिम् महादेवसुतं गुरुगुहनुतं महादेवसुतं गुरुगुहनुतं महादेवसुतं गुरुगुहनुतं मारकोटि प्रकाशं शान्तं महाकाव्यनाटकादिप्रियं मूषकवाहनमोदकप्रियं महाकाव्यनाटकादिप्रियं मूषकवाहनमोदकप्रियं महागणपतिं मनसा स्मरामि. Thank you.
Thank you, Srinidhi, for rendering invocation with a melodious song. Now we have assembled here on this 5 days GIAN course on integrated water resources management. We know the best thing on the earth is water. Water, it's a very precious natural national resource, but it's available in a fixed quantity. In fact, in our country there is less land, population is more, water resource is less. India has only 2.4% of world's land, 18% of population, 4% of water resource, and this 4% is again, it is not evenly distributed. So this uneven distribution of water resource, there is chances of increasing complexity in the water conflicts. In our India, there is a practice of approaching tribunals. So tribunals will take decades to give orders. The best example is our Kaveri water tribunal. They approached in 1970 and the order came in 1990. So these interstate river water disputes should be resolved as early as possible to ensure greater cooperation between the states. Otherwise, it will hinder our cooperative federalism of our nation. In fact, there is recently also most of the rivers in our India, they are all in a polluted state. Even recently announced central government budget, Prime Minister has allocated fund for providing clean drinking water, even for cleaning the rivers, and also for pollution control. That is the condition of the rivers. In fact, the Ganga cleaning project, it has come under the Ministry of Water Resource. Government is spending crores of rupees, not just 10, 20, hundreds of crores of rupees. But the result is not encouraging, in fact. And the Central Water Commission under the Ministry of Water Resource, they are also organizing workshops. And one of the objectives of the workshop is to have international experience in the workshops. India has not yet reached, in fact, the level of having guidelines in integrated water resource management. Whereas other developed countries, they have a guidelines for integrated water resource management. So for India, there is a need to undertake development measures along with management measures. So in this direction, the GIAN objective is also one of the major objective is to go for integrated water resource management. Now today we have with us Professor C. Rajshekhar Murthy, emeritus scientist from Canada. Now, if I read his complete list of activities as a scientist, as a professor, as a consultant, it runs into a few pages, but I'll try to put it in brief. He did his master's degree from Indian Institute of Science and PhD from University of Waterloo, Canada. He has visited almost all Indian IITs. He worked as research scientist in National Water Research Institute, as a chief applied research division in National Water Research Institute, as senior research scientist Environment Canada, as a professor in the Department of Civil Engineering, McMaster University, Canada, and he has visited Russian Academy of Science, Chinese Academy of Science, China, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, Nagpur. He worked as Indian project scientist for Bangalore Air Quality Management System. His area of interest is, in fact, again, urban air quality monitoring, integrated coastal area management, integrated water resource management. Sir, we are very much delighted to have you with us. I request our principal, Dr. B. Ravishankar, to welcome our chief guest with a bouquet. Thank you, sir. So we have with us our principal, who is very supportive in all our student-centric activities. I feel very happy to work with him. I request Professor Suresh to welcome our principal with a flower bouquet. Now we have one more person with us, one more nice person, our vice principal, Dr. Dikshit, Ravishankar Dikshit sir, who is also our GIAN local GIAN coordinator. I request our Professor Sampath Kumar to invite our vice principal. So we have Prasann Kumar, our head of the department. I request Professor Mayanak to welcome Prasann Kumar. We have our coordinator, one more coordinator, Dr. Reshmi Devi, with us. I welcome you, madam. I welcome all heads of the different departments, participants, colleagues, and students. Now it's time to light the lamp. I request dignitaries on the dais to inaugurate the function by lighting the lamp. We have with us Mrs. C. Rajshakramurthy also. I welcome you, madam. Please. Now I request Dr. Ravishankar Dikshit to talk on GIAN.
our chief guest, Professor Rajshekhar Murthy, Emeritus Scientist, National Water Research Institute, Canada, and also our main resource person, and our principal, Dr. B.V. Ravishankar, and the course coordinators, Professor Ram Krishnaya and Dr. Reshmi Devi, and all our senior faculty from Department of Civil Engineering and also other faculty who are here, and all the participants. A very good morning to all of you. So, it gives me immense pleasure to see that the Department of Civil Engineering, is organizing this GIAN program. This is an initiative from the Ministry of Human Resources Development, that is MHRD, right? And we are very happy to, proud to say that BMS College of Engineering is just one of the two colleges in Karnataka who have been, organizing these GIAN programs. The other is JC Mysore. So this is something that we are really happy. And also one more thing is, all the proposals we send, we have just around less than 50% of success rate. That is, out of 25, we have around 12 which have been approved. So this is the 12th and last GIAN program that we are conducting in the second phase of this initiative from MHRD. So and so far we have received more than 60 lakhs from the government, central government, and we are very happy to be part of this. And also, our chief guest, Professor Rajshekhar Murthy, has come all the way from Canada, and in supporting this program, and then the proposal that he sent along with our course coordinators was accepted. And thank you, sir, for taking all the trouble to be here with us and enlighten all our participants about your knowledge on this very important topic of integrated water resource management. So I thank him on our behalf. So one more thing is that like this GIAN program, the success of it and whether it goes into the third phase or not depends on all you participants, all the participants who are here, right? So I earnestly request you to take this very seriously, because this is something that is sort of a historical moment for us, being recognized by the central government, and then also having an eminent professor like Professor Rajshekhar Murthy coming here, being with us, right? Not all institutions get this opportunity. So I think we should take this very seriously, and the more serious we are about this, the better the chances of this going into a third phase, because a lot of it depends upon the successful outcomes of the GIAN programs that we have been conducting. So far it's been a good journey for BMS College of Engineering, and also I wish all the participants a very happy, good, fruitful learning the next week, right? I am sure all of you will benefit from the experience and wisdom of Professor Rajshekhar Murthy, and we'll take it forward and make this a huge success. And also I would like to place my thanks for MHRD and the coordinating organization, that is IIT Kharagpur, who is the lead coordinator on behalf of MHRD. So they are the ones who take our proposals, get it screened by referees from all over India and all over the world, and then finally grant their approval and release the funds. So they are the ones who are coordinating with us. So we are very thankful to them. So I thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to be part of you, and wish you a very happy 5 days, and give it your best, right? And hope your learning is very good from this workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for briefing about GIAN. We have with us our Dean Academics, Professor Samita Maitri also. I welcome you, madam. Srinidhi, please. Now, I request Professor C. Rajshekhar Murthy to address the...
Thank you, Professor Ramakrishnaya, for that nice introduction. I'm very pleased to be here in the campus of the BMS College of Engineering. This city is not particularly new to me. I studied in University College of Engineering many years ago. As I was talking during the formal, during the meeting with the principal, that we had at that time only 3 engineering institutions, UVC, BMS College of Engineering, and NIE. Let me give a brief introduction about my own background. I am essentially a mechanical engineer, drifted into an area which is very challenging and interesting in the fluid mechanics, and then gradually drifted into geophysical fluid mechanics, whose application to environmental problems was of utmost interest in not only in developed countries, but also, of course, increasingly in countries like India and other parts of the world. In the introductory remarks, Professor Ramakrishna was mentioning about the challenges that are placed in India in view of the very high population and the very limited water resources in the country. I come from a country, the population is 30 million, roughly about 3 crores, and we have 25% of the known surface waters in the world in Canada. So in that sense, I think our challenges are very different. Canada is considered one of the water solutions country. We take the management of the water resources very seriously, not so much from the point of view of quantity, because we have plenty of water, surface, as well as, of course, many other sources such as the ice caps and all the northern latitude water availability. Quantity is not an issue as far as we are concerned, but what we are concerned about is the quality, because quality is as important as quantity. Once you have degraded a water body, that means once you sacrifice the quality, quantity is equally sacrificed, because it's not very particularly. So we take management of water resources very seriously. And as Professor Ramakrishna mentioned, this integrated water resources management has become one of the most program that has been followed through to various international agencies, which we have, of course, opportunity of discussing this one during the course of the next 5 days, and try to learn from the experiences of countries which have already adopted this IWRM principles and concepts, and see how best we can try to manage water resources, limited water resources that we have in this country. Just before coming, I was just glancing through the newspaper. There are 2 stories which came to my attention. One of them is the water scarcity in some of the districts in Chikmagalur. This is a story that has appeared in the Deccan Herald this morning. There is a crisis type of proportion, because people get water through tankers every 4 to 10 days. And each drum of water costs 30 rupees to buy. And that is the one extreme situation where the scarcity of water, of course, has caused a lot of hardships to the rural community. This is just yesterday. And of course, equally important that we have witnessed last night is the very heavy rainfall in Bangalore, which is an entirely different problem altogether, is the poor maintenance and management problem of excessive water, which has caused inundation, clogging, and quite a lot of hardships to this one. So these are 2 different types of issues that we are looking at, and both require, of course, an integrated type of approach to manage the water, whether it is the scarcity of water as a consequence of poor planning, or even availability, and also at the same time, how do we manage the problems that are created by excessive water, whether it is due to various reasons. Of course, we have opportunity of discussing that one, to what extent that these type of extreme situations that we are faced with, and how we are going to deal with them. So integrated water resources management in that sense is a type of governance where you try to look at the entire watershed or the river basin where the land, water, everything has an equal importance, not sectoral type of development that we have been hitherto doing it. Now what we are doing now is simply trying to find water from greater and greater distances, such as Kaveri, or extract water from greater and greater depths. This kind of linear logic of trying to find water wherever we can from greater distances or greater depths is not going to be sustainable, not only now, in the long run. So we have to look at a new form of governance, how we are going to manage this very important, this one. As you know, water, food, energy, health is the nexus. That is, of course, very intricately connected, not only with the demands that is posed by various aspects of urbanization, industrialization, population growth, but also at the same time that we have to make sure that this order of economic development, where water plays a very important role, is taken into consideration. Before I conclude, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the BMS College of Engineering Management and the entire GIAN team, in particular, of course, Professor Ramakrishnaya, whose commitment and perseverance has brought us all together here. We have an opportunity in the next 5 days to discuss various aspects of integrated water resources management. I come from a perspective where we have been challenged to manage the water quality issues. And of course, water quantity issues are also equally important. And I have had opportunity of working on these areas in many countries. So I would be very happy to share with all of you. Again, thank you very much for providing this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for briefing about the importance and necessity of integrated water resources management. Now, I request our head of the department, Civil Engineering, Dr. Prasann Kumar, to brief about the department profile.
Thank you, Professor Ramakrishnaya, for giving me an opportunity to talk about the department. I think most of you know our department, one of the oldest branches of engineering, which was started as the core branch of engineering in the year 1946, when BMS College of Engineering was established. It is more than about 7 decades. This program has been running continuously and successfully, and students have acquired degrees, not only UG, PG, and also PhD degrees, and it has grown in leaps and bounds. Currently, in the year 2008, it has been granted autonomous status, and all the autonomous programs are running successfully. And currently, the department is running 3 PG programs: one in construction technology and management, highway technology and management, and environmental sciences. So all these programs, in addition to these programs, PhD programs are also running. And currently, I am very, very happy to say that if you browse through the website of VTU, the maximum number of research supervisors are from BMS College of Engineering Civil Engineering Department. I am extremely happy. If you go through that, there are about 24 research supervisors from Civil Engineering Department alone. That gives a status of the Civil Engineering Department and the research impetus that is given from the department, and the number of students who are registered. As I know, about 15 students have so far 15 students have received the PhD degree, and then about 50 students are pursuing their PhD degree under various branches of civil engineering. Even though it mainly caters to construction technology, highway, and water resources, other branches are also pursuing, maybe in dynamics or masonry or public health engineering, or they are also pursuing their PhD program in these programs. And also I am happy to say that some international students have also registered in the department for their PhD program, and I am happy to say that our faculties are recognized, very well recognized, not only at the college level but also at the state level, but also at the primary institutions level, whether it is IIT level, IITs or IIScs. They say that I have heard about it, I have heard about this professor. They keep on saying that whenever I visit and I say something, they particularly mention the names. So it gives me immense happiness to say that our department has reached that state. Uh, and also I want to say that about 25 faculties have acquired PhDs from premier institutions such as IITs and IIScs, and with the result their focus is has turned basically from UG degree program to research oriented program. You cannot say that even though it was started as a UG degree program, now it has branched out into a research based and program, and we are doing consultancy and other services successfully for the past 1.5 decades. And we have been receiving grants from MHRD, AICT and other resources so far successfully. And the department has been accredited by NBA for 6 years under Tier 1. I'm also happy to say that it's one of the few colleges in Karnataka to this department, civil engineering department, has received accreditation for 6 years. So this is about this department, and I would like to say few words of appreciation about our beloved principal B. Ravi Shankar, because it's been a constant support. The doors are always open. Well, this is what I have seen. Whenever I go there, whatever may be the type of problem, we go there. We always find a solution. So I'm extremely happy to say that this is the state of the department and the college. So with these few words, I want to say thank Professor Ramakrishnaya for giving me an opportunity to speak about the department, and also I want to thank. I also, in the end, I wish the participants so that they learn a better knowledge from this course, and then go back happily, and then take it into their areas of research or academics from this participation. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for briefing about the department, faculty, research. Now I request our principal, Dr. B.V. Ravi Shankar, to deliver presidential address.
Good morning. Respected speaker of the event, Professor Sri Rajshekhar Murthy, a great scientist, and also the National Water Resource Institute, Emeritus Scientist of National Water Resource Institute, Canada. Apart from that, my esteemed colleagues, my congratulations to the Department of Civil Engineering for organizing this particular event of GIAN, and also my compliments to Professor Ramakrishnaya and Madam Rashmi for initiating and selecting one of the topics for discussions. Anyway, we have been talking about, if you recollect, in Bangalore, way back few years, the supply of water was almost 24 hours and 7 days. Then later on, it was somehow made it for 3 days, then 2 days, then alternate days, and now once in a week, sometimes. That means, say, we had resources, but somehow we failed to maintain the resources, or otherwise to say, manage the resources. And also when Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, in fact, he brought out a policy of interlinking the rivers. I think that would have been an apt solution for such calamities. But anyway, hope one day it is going to take place. Then it was also said the cost of the water is going to be much more than the cost of the fuel. Days are going to be very serious. Such being the situation, I think we have to really worry about and also understand how to manage the resources available. Again, it is predicted, if the wars are going to happen in the near future, it is not for any other resources, it will be for water. So therefore, the things are going to be very serious, and we need to become alert, not only alert, and attending to such programs like GIAN programs to acquire jnana in order to understand ourselves and update ourselves in order to make these sorts of management policies. I hope the 5 days or maybe 6 days of your presence here and the inputs from the resource person, Sri Rajshekhar Murthy, is going to be very useful, and the objectives of GIAN program is going to be met. Hoping to see the process of management. Definitely the students are going to come out with some policies, because I see many of the young minds sitting here. It's not that you are sitting here. I think you need to keep thinking, because engineering is always thinking. Thoughts should flow. Only when you start activating your mind, the thoughts will flow. And the moment the thoughts flows, please write it down and see that how beautifully you can bring it to the action is what it should happen. So therefore, keep not only physically present, but mentally you need to be very alert and acquire, and what best you can take it. All these, whatever you are going to acquire for these days is what is important. With this, I thank the organizers, and also compliments the Department of Civil Engineering. Hope such GIAN program is going to be many more in the Department of Civil Engineering. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for delivering the presidential address. As Professor said, as Principal said, we have failed in managing, the water resource, what we have little. Even the water supply public utilities, they are facing huge amount of water loss in the distribution system. So that's my lecture, which will be there in the third day. Now, once again, I welcome all of you to this GIAN course on integrated water resources management. Thank you for coming here. Now, we have arranged a tea, but before the tea, we will have a group photo in front of PG block. We'll have group photo, and then we'll come back for a tea. Now the sessions will start at 11:30. So please come back at 11:30.
Esteemed dignitaries on the dais and dignitaries of the dais, very good morning to all of you. As we are coming to the end of this inaugural session, it's my privilege to place on record our gratitude to our guest of honor, Dr. C. Rajshekhar Murthy, who is also the resource person for this program. So thank you very much for readily accepting our invitation to be a resource person for this program. During the inaugural address itself, sir has given us a nutshell of the severity or the necessity of integrated water resource management. I'm certain that during the series of lectures what we are going to listen in this week, we will be immensely benefited from the lectures delivered from the vast experience of sir. So thank you very much. I also like to extend my gratitude to Mrs. Murthy, who is being with us today for this program. Our beloved principal, Dr. B.V. Ravichankar, has always been a constant support for all the program organized in the college. I express our deep gratitude to you, sir, for wholehearted cooperation and support at every stage of this program. Right from the course proposal submission, Vice Principal Dr. Ravishankar Dikshit, who is also the local institutional coordinator.
Just mention to give memento to Rajshekhar.
I request you to hand over a memento, token of our appreciation to guest of honor. Dr. Ravishankar Dikshit is also the local institutional coordinator for the GIAN program, and he has been with us providing all the valuable suggestions and guidelines at every stage. Thank you very much, sir, for your wholehearted support. Any program organized at the department needs the boundless support of the head of the department. We are happy to have our HOD, Dr. Prasanna Kumar, with us today during this program. And thank you, sir, thank you very much, sir, for accommodating all our requirements and facilitated smooth conduction of this program. I also extend our gratitude to the HOD, Mechanical Engineering, for providing us this wonderful venue and all the technical facilities here. Thank you, sir. Our sincere thanks to our donor trustee and the generous management of BMSE for providing all the necessary support all throughout this program. I also extend my sincere gratitude to all my colleagues in the Department of Civil Engineering for their timely help and guidance which made this program successful. I also extend my gratitude to the Secretary of Hostels for accommodating our participants and for providing the food and other necessary support. Also, I like to thank the technical person who are behind the camera for web telecast and video recording. Thank you. I also extend my gratitude to MHRD and IIT Kharagpur, who is the coordinator for the GIAN program, for approving this program and for providing the financial support for this. Lastly, but yet another very important group of people are the students whose hard work made this event success. Thank you very much for your wholehearted support. Today we have participants from BMSE and from other institute in Bangalore, from other parts of the states and other states of India. I hope all of you will have a wonderful learning experience, and thank you very much for expressing your interest to learn this interesting topic of integrated water resource management, which is very relevant in today's world. Once again, I thank each and every one of you who has been involved directly or indirectly with this program. Thank you very much. The session will start from 11:30. Kindly assemble back by 11:30. Thank you.
I hope all are assembled back. Anyone is still missing among students or participants? Still missing? Can you call them up and ask them to come soon? We'll start within 5 minutes. Business as usual approach versus imaginative approaches. I welcome Dr. C. Rajshekar Murthy sir to take over the session.
Since we are going to be together for the next 5 days, we will have opportunity of meeting each one of you to get to know where you come from, what are your interests and all those things. So I will skip this introductory type of formality for the time being, because we will meet various coffee breaks, lunch and other places. So in the next 5 days, I am going to talk to you on various aspects of water resources management and development. And as I mentioned in my introduction in the inaugural function, I actually trained as a mechanical engineer. I had absolutely no background whatsoever about water resources. But when I went to Canada, of course, opportunities opened up to work on environmental issues. One of the fundamental aspects in terms of scientific and technical knowledge in trying to manage the environment is the central core is the fluid mechanics, the application of fluid mechanics to environmental problems, be it atmospheric applications or aquatic applications or oceanic applications. It does not really matter, because the fluid motion is generally governed by universal laws. So that is how I got drifted into this one, and as you go along you will get to know some of these aspects. So the introductory lecture in IWRM is to expose you to the complexities that exist in terms of managing this precious resource, which is very important for human survival. And there are, I will try to historically trace what has happened in the last 50 or 100 years, and then how the thinking that the past practices or policies or programs are not going to be sustainable in the long run if we proceed in the same lines, and therefore there is need to think in a different direction altogether in terms of managing this resource. So some of you are probably very familiar with some of these facts and figures that often repeated in many publications, and also, of course, you probably have come across. There is a widespread problem in terms of both in terms of lack of clean drinking water. As you can see that there is almost 1 billion people lack access, mostly of course maybe are in the African and sub-Saharan and also in the Asian countries, and also similarly the adequate sanitation, which is very much linked with the with water as a resource. So these are some of the alarming statistics that points fingers at looking at this the management of this resource in an entirely different way, because we cannot continue to do what we have been doing it in the last 50 or 100 years. Because we see many countries rapidly depleting groundwater resources. Of course, India is one of them, and of course probably the foremost one, as you will see some of the data that I will show you later on. We are not the only one exception, but other countries like China, even the former Soviet Union, which had plenty of surface water, yet depleted their groundwater resources. So there is the alarming statistics which shows that the conventional approach, the so-called business as usual approach, or some people would like to call it, is not really working. At least in many countries where this resource is rather limited, or it is available both differentially distributed, both temporally, such as in India, because we get monsoons only periodically, or of course it is spatial also distributed, which is not available where we really want it, which needs to be done in terms of transporting the water from greater distances, as we know in this country or in this city where we depend on the Kaveri water supply. So there are issues that we have to look at it, how we can change our thinking in terms of managing this resource. It is a very complex issue because management of this resource, as you would see as you go along, is more complex both in terms of policies as well as other issues such as socio-economic issues. So one has to be very careful. But there is a lot of thinking has gone into this, at least in the last 25 years, by various international agencies who have paid attention to this problem, particularly in the developing world, and they have come up with quite a lot of formulations in terms of how we have to manage this resource, and how we have reached a stage where this so-called IWRM, the Integrated Water Resources Management, as a tool, a governance tool to manage the freshwater resources. So historically, I will go through how the management of this resource has been followed. If you look at it purely from the point of view of quantity, say from 200 before the Christian era to 2000 Christian era, prior to 200 BCE, the humanity or the humans withdrew water without changing the natural source functions. In other words, a river basin was meant for a particular type of activity. We just withdrew the water that is sufficient and used it without really causing much. And the river basin or the river had the capacity, natural ability, or the assimilative capacity, or whatever you may call it, to function as an ecosystem, as well often we call it, whether it is for fishing, recreation, navigation, etc. Essentially, we did not alter the morphology of the water basin, whether it is a river basin or lakes or water bodies. So then gradually as you go along in the time scale at 2000 BCE, then we started altering the natural water resources. The morphological characteristics of the basin was varied. You started building man-made run-of-the-river dams, and some of you civil engineers, you know the terminology. And so there was some influence in terms of changing the characteristics of the water body or the water resource source itself. And then as you go along the time scale at 500 BCE, you started building single-purpose storage dams and withdrawals, whether it is for irrigation or power generation or drinking water. So there was changes that were taking place continuously. So we come to the last century, 900 Christian era, multi-purpose storage and withdrawal dams. You have heard of many of these. This one in all over the world, where this manipulation of the river basin by building huge dams for storing the water and withdrawing the water for various purposes, be it for agriculture, power generation, drinking, all those type of aspects. So what started off with a single storage withdrawal to change into multi-purpose storage and withdrawal. Then in the 1930s, we started seeing integrated basin river projects. The classic one that you can think of is the Damodar Valley project in the United States, and of course many other basins in other parts of the world. So in fact, I think the integrated river basin type of projects already started initiating in India. If you recall, the K.R. Sagar Dam was built in 1924, and later on, of course, in 1934, the Mettur Dam was built in Tamil Nadu. So this integrated river basin type of projects to manipulate or to manipulate the water river basins for various human needs. So I'll jump another 30 years. In 1960, there was already a crisis, if not a crisis, at least concern that this finite limited resource is gradually this one. So we have to think of new ways of management. Of course, conservation ideas started coming, water conservation, and then the management of the demand. What we are doing now is we are simply managing the demand. There is more water demand, so we bring more water, whether it is either from the river basins or groundwater or whatever sources that are easily available. So demand management, obviously through pricing and regulation. So in other words, you already started dealing with this issue of water as an economic or a commodity. Up to the time, I will talk about this a little later on, the water per se was not viewed in an economic terms or in terms of as a commodity. But gradually, as you see in the 60s, this demand management through pricing, regulation, and then the new technologies started cropping into this one. So there was a shift in trying to manage still managing as a conventional business as usual approach, but added to that one is these ideas of conservation, demand management, and introduction of new technologies, different types of flood protection, different types of agricultural practices, with various types of irrigation techniques. So there is some concerted effort was brought into picture to manage, still staying within the business as usual approach type of concept. So then we move on another 10 years, environmental protection assessment became an important aspect. As water that we cannot simply try to manage is in a sectoral way as a resource per se, because water not only has an important role in terms of our human survival as well as economic development, but also equally important issue is to protect the ecosystem or the environment, so that we don't jeopardize the livelihood of the future generation. So environmental issues started playing an important role, both in terms of the quality type of issues, and measures were brought in to make an environmental assessment impact and all those type of things, human activities on the ecosystem itself, the aquatic environment, whether it's a river basin or a water body or a groundwater system, it doesn't really matter as long as environmental issue. So a little later on, then of course, full effects of the water storage withdrawal, then the socio-economics of dams. You've heard of all this Narmada Bachao issues, displacement of population, all the social impacts started gradually appearing because of the size in which we have started manipulating the water courses. So large-scale diversion schemes, such schemes, although not in a, we really in this country, this so-called concept of river linking and large-scale transfer of water from one water basin to another water basin is still in the primitive stage. But in other countries, it has been done quite. It's been done, but its consequences have been already felt. A good example is the former Soviet Union, where they diverted much of the water from the Volga River, which was draining into the Aral Sea. Practically everything was used in the upstream for various human activities. As a consequence, there was not the inflow that was required to the Aral Sea was completely cut off and had a very serious complications. So all this gave rise to, in the 80s, is to this so-called, what I call the ecosystem, what we generally call as the ecosystem approach to manage the aquatic resources. Aquatic resources, when I say the water is one element of it, there is every other aspect of the aquatic resources, which includes the management of the resources associated with the ecosystem as a whole. So later on, of course, now we have many issues in terms of information technologies, which is applied in terms of water resources management. We have nanotechnologies, applications in terms of water quality issues. And we have technological innovations now to deal with some of the issues of water management, still within the concept of business as usual approach. We have not changed that one very much. For example, we have technology is now available, robotic technology that is available to identify, locate the leaks, fix them without any intervention from the, so such technological applications have been incorporated, particularly in terms of managing the municipal drinking water systems throughout the world. So this is historically in terms of how the quantity issue has been handled, essentially more or less sort of rising the scale as the demand increased in terms of trying to take advantage of the natural resource. But simultaneously, if we look at from the quality side of it, what are the implications in terms of degradation of water quality? What are the issues that you have been faced with? Historically, if you see from the 1850 onwards, and I show the spatial scale on the ordinate and the time scale here, see we used to have epidemics. All of us are very familiar with the cholera, plague, and other types of epidemics, sometimes quite often related to water issues. Then we had the problem of management of sewage, then gradually, of course, with all the energy crisis where thermal power plants, nuclear power plants started building, which added to this thermal pollution type of issues, particularly in areas where we have to depend on the limited water bodies. It may not be a very significant influence in large water bodies such as we have in Canada, large lakes, but in here, when you have to use the water as a medium for cooling water for the power generation, it is an important issue. Then we started gradually seeing biological implications. Eutrophication is something which is caused by the enrichment of the water body to very high levels of nutrients such as phosphates and nitrates, which are plenty in various human activities that we have. So eutrophication became an important issue. Then gradually, of course, as we progressed in time scale, many toxic substances became an important issue, because these toxic substances are used in many household items and in many industrial products and in many technological this one. So I'm sure that all of you know about when I talk about toxins, you have heard of the Minamata disease, mercury pollution in Japan, which was much highlighted some 50 years ago. And we had similar type of problems in Canada, although Canada is, as I said, we had, just to give you an example of what really happened was both Canada and the United States were disposing of these toxic substances in landfill sites. So these landfill sites, of course, as you know, that gradually with time, the groundwater starts seeping, and of course, it was along with it was carrying the toxic substances. Way back in the late 70s, we noticed this dioxin in the drinking water supplies one of the communities. So it became because toxic substances, unlike this one is quite, particularly from the point of view of human health, is a very serious issue that has to be dealt with. Then, of course, you see we have the nitrate pollution. We'll have a chance to discuss some of those things, waste disposal problems. Then you had these large dams, when you talked about the socio-economic implications of these large dams of displacing large populations, depriving of their livelihood. Then we are faced with, this one is the acidification issues. It is an interrelated problem with air pollution. Long-range transport of air pollutants may end up in aquatic zones where this acidification became an issue. So on. Finally, of course, now we are faced with climate change and global warming. Its effect in terms of water resources, what type of resiliency that we have to build and plan, those type of things. So from a quality perspective, this is how historically we have moved. So in terms of looking at this one from an international perspective, when I'm talking about international perspective is the Earth Summit and the Millennium Development Goals and those type of things which the international institutions have been talking about it. And of course, India is a very active participating country in that. So we have here the waterborne diseases represents a global annual economic loss of US dollars, $186 billion. So in other words, essentially to drive home how important it is both manage this vital resource in a more organized and integrated fashion. So you see some of the health implications. 1/2 of the world's population will live under conditions of severe water stress. Water stress we generally determine when the consumption exceeds by at least 10% than the available resources. Then the stress of that one, that you will start this one. And it can particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia and Middle East. So in essence, it is brought to the attention that water must be an increasing focus in all the developmental agenda. So economic development. So if I have to sum up the gravity of the situation, water scarcity is the defining crisis of this century. Absolutely, there is no question about it. It is already having serious implications in many countries, including in India. As I mentioned in my introductory remarks, I think also your principal was talking about how the availability of water has been gradually modified because of population growth, industrialization, and all those type of things. So water scarcity is certainly going to be one of the most important aspects that you have to deal with in this century. So in terms of trying to highlight some of the international policies, there is a general understanding to meet the basic human needs. When I say human needs, as you could see, is their drinking, just for cooking, and sanitation and hygiene. Generally, at the lower end of the scale, you can manage with 50 liters of water. If you had 100 liters, of course, you'll be probably better off, a little bit better off. Even that minimum requirement, the world population without access to BWR, which is 50 to 100 centiliters per capita per day, there is about 30 to 40% of the population in the world. And as I mentioned, per capita minimum is 100, say, let us say 100 liters per day. That is for the basic. But if you consider the water stress, I'm talking about in general terms. It may not particularly be for any particular country. If you consider food production and what is required for the industrial activity like power generation, all other industrial activity, domestic needs, generally a country which has 17 cubic meters per capita per year, which is considered water sufficiency. If you have that much of water, you may have occasional or localized water scarcity, water stress in that sense. The water stress beginning to occur when you have less than 1,000 cubic meters per capita per year, limits economic development. It will have implications on health, and it will have implications on human well-being. When the level, I'm talking about in a very global perspective, I'm not talking about anything in particular. In any country, when you have less than 1,000 cubic meters per capita per year, then you start having water stress. If you have below 500 cubic meters per capita per year, absolute scarcity. In other words, it poses a threat to life. So that's what we call the water scarcity. Just remember these numbers because they keep cropping up as we go along talking about them. So if you look at it in a global perspective, in the year 2000, freshwater availability, you see the picture, the blue area is the relative sufficiency. In other words, most of the countries in that blue area had 1,700 meter cube per second or higher. And there was only 3% had scarcity. In other words, they had only less than 500 meter cube per second per person. And 5% had stress. In other words, it is between 500 to 1,000 meter cube per second. That picture in 2000 is going to be, we have already reached the stage that this freshwater availability population in 2025, which is not very far, another 5 years or so. But in fact, I can tell you already we have reached those numbers. The relative sufficiency has gradually reduced from what was 92% to only 62%. The water scarcity population is from 3%, it has gone up to 7%, and the water stress from 5% to 31%. In other words, we have this serious problem in terms of trying to deal with the water issues. And in a sense, to quantify, you need some kind of an yardstick. Of course, that's the way that stress and scarcity is done. So this particular lecture, first lecture, is purely introductory type of this, and we will deal with it some nitty-gritties later on. So if you look at the freshwater availability, meter cube per second person, you can see the diagram down here. Scarcity 1 to 1,000 meter cube per capita, up to 1,700. I said 1,700 is the limit where you consider sufficiency. So then if you go to higher this one, so then you have I don't know why that vulnerability comes in. So it is beyond that. is the one which is safe in terms of this one. So this is the most, this one where we are sitting here in the blue area, we are in the water stress type of situation. And as you can see here, Canada, where I come from, we have, we are completely self-sufficient in terms of the water resources. So similarly, if you look at the way in which the groundwater has been exploited in various countries, it is in terms of kilometer cube per year. You could see just India here, which is this diamond shaped, this one. It is really alarming in which we have been extracting the groundwater from 1950 to 2010. We have reached. That's no wonder. I think there is a crisis situation in terms of the groundwater situation is concerned, because as I mentioned to you in the introduction, these districts of Chikmagalur, they have sunk several boreholes, bore wells, and more than half of them are dry. So we are reaching the limit of engineering capability to pump water from at greater depths. So there's a serious type of situation. It's not limited to only India, although India is quite extreme in one sense, but all other countries are also having similar type of problems. This is United States. It is not such a serious problem for them because they have plenty of fresh surface water which can accommodate their needs, but many other countries have. So if you also look at it in a different way, national per capita water footprint and the contribution of different consumption categories for selected countries, this is the water footprint. In other words, of course, majority of the water that you can see is for the agricultural requirements. Then next is industrial, and domestic or the municipal drinking water is a small fraction, nevertheless, of course, very important. And as you could see here in India, this is meter cube per capita per year. We are, as I mentioned, 1700 is considered sort of a self-sufficiency, and many countries, of course, are well below that. So India is here sort of a scarcity, but not really stress in that sense. So then let us try to look at it, water in terms of various human and other activities. Urbanization, of course, is a very important this one, because we know as of now there are about 30 to 40% of the population is urbanized, and the urbanization is taking place in a much faster pace in developing countries, but also in India. So the urbanization, particularly from the point of view of drinking water, poses a very serious problem. So urban areas are expected to absorb population growth, significant rural-urban migration. Majority will be living in as you know, overcrowded slums, inadequate water and sanitation services. And World Health Organization has already predicted following cities will run out of water by 2050. And Bangalore is there in that list. And the crisis in Bangalore is quite, it's already come to the international recognition. You probably have read in the newspaper, Cape Town had a very serious problem last summer. So many countries, including some of the cities in Europe, such as London, even Tokyo has problems, but nowhere near that severity as what we have in this country particularly. So safe drinking water systems and adequate sanitation will be essential to ensure cities to grow sustainably. Of course, it's a very motherhood statement. Everyone recognizes that. So it's extending these services to the millions and millions of urbanites will play a key role in terms of safeguarding the health and security in cities, and also, of course, protecting the economies. As you know, that the urban area cities are the economic engines, and so it's not only the municipal drinking water purposes, but also for various industrial activities. So you have to manage water within the context of this rapid urbanization that is taking place. Then the question, of course, is also somewhat interlinked, is water and sanitation and human rights. Internationally, many international organizations, United Nations, World Health Organization, everyone has recognized and stated that access to water and sanitation are recognized as human rights. It is your birthright to have these things adequately provided. So lack of access to safe and sufficient affordable water, sanitation, hygiene facilities has devastating effect on health and dignity, particularly the women and children, because women in most of the developing countries, but even in India, rural India particularly, have the major responsibility for water. So people, in general, it is the international organizations in their wisdom have said that people have the rights, human rights for sufficient water and sanitation. So it's just a matter of right which they can demand in terms of whether it is provided or not is altogether a different question. So then it comes to energy, as I mentioned before in the introduction, water, energy, food, and health is the nexus that drives the economic development. So energy and water are intricately connected. There are different sources of energy and electricity. All require water for various production processes. Of course, water is the essential source for the hydroelectric power generation, but not only that, but also, of course, for the various other modes of energy generation, including thermal, nuclear, and all this one. So including extraction of raw materials for power plants, cultivation of crops for biofuels, which is one of the things which has been talked about quite a bit in recent years in terms of the minimizing the air pollution. So there is a nexus in terms of water and energy. And now you often have heard of this. Quite often, any extreme event that takes place in the world which relates to water, there's a tendency by the academic community at large to attribute that one to climate change. It's not necessarily so. It may be seasonal variability, but nevertheless, climate change is playing an important role in terms of water. So the higher temperatures and more extreme and less predictable weather conditions are projected to affect availability and distribution of rainfall, and also snow melt in northern latitudes, and also river flows and groundwater, and further deteriorates the water quality issues. And this major impact is going to be in the poor and low-income communities who are already most vulnerable to any threats of water supply and are likely to be the worst affected. If we are not properly prepared to deal with the water management issues under conditions of climate change and a sort of building up a resiliency in developing the water resources developmental projects. And then, of course, we hear more floods and severe droughts are predicted. Changes in water availability will also impact health and food security and have already proven to trigger refugee dynamics and political instability. This is a sort of a think tank. People think in terms of what are the ramifications should the climate change take its hold, the 2-degree rise in atmospheric temperature, which is the limit that they are prepared to accept. So, and then you have the similar type of this one, water and natural disasters. The challenges that are placed by water-related disasters pose direct impact in terms of damage to buildings, crops, infrastructure, and loss of life and property. I don't have to emphasize this. This very city has experienced this one in the last 2 summers. The impact of this, whether it is caused by climate change or not, it is a natural disaster in terms of if you are faced with a situation where you had unprecedented precipitation, for which you have not developed the infrastructure to deal with, you are going to have ramifications in terms of loss of productivity, livelihoods, and all those things. So all these things in terms of natural disasters, even natural disasters could occur even in a country where there is plenty of water due to water quality issues. If the water quality is hampered for some unknown disaster. For example, we had a situation in Canada with a nuclear power plant started leaking low-level radioactivity, which was getting through the cooling water system into the lake, and the same water is drawn for drinking purposes. So these natural disasters could have both in terms of water quantity as well as water quality issues. So the increasing economic cost and toll of disaster should be significant. Incentive for the governments and to be prepared for it and develop a strategy to deal these type of natural disasters. In this particular course, of course, we are talking only water, which essentially the flooding and those type of things that we often experience. So these are the type of things that one should be prepared in dealing with it. I mean, for example, as I mentioned, last night's downpour, many parts of the city was inundated. The stormwater drains were clogged because they were all not maintained properly. And then it's caused a disruption, maybe not severe, but did cause a disruption for the motorists and even some damage to the infrastructure and all those levels. So you must have the vision to take into account the strategies that we have incorporated in terms of water resources management, what impact that may have in case of natural. So in the past, as in a broader sense that I have to this one, water resources management been very heavily dominated by engineers, hydraulic engineers to be very specific, mostly from the civil engineering department. They are only accustomed to deal with quantity, CUSEX. That's all that they are manage the quantity issues. Little they knew what impact this water has on the ecosystem as a whole. When I talk about the ecosystem in a watershed, it has its implication in terms of the natural vegetation. It has implication in terms of the other life, for example, in a river system, the fisheries and all the, so the whole ecosystem services that goes along with it. Just another example that I can give you about this managing this Western Ghats. Many of you have read about this one. Quite often we try to look at the water availability, whether it is from the Ettinhole or any other this one, purely from the point of view of our own needs, human needs. Very little, we never really even think in terms of what impact it has on the ecosystem as a whole. When we fail to recognize that we are only one element in the entire ecosystem. So we may be have the intelligence, we may have this one to exploit it, but you are only doing it at your own peril. So the ecosystem aspects is this ecosystem approach type of concepts were started evolving in the early later part of the in the 50s, 1950s and 60s, where people started realizing that excessive exploitation of the water resources for human needs has a direct impact on the ecosystem as a whole. I can give examples of that as we go along later on. So there are some challenges, of course there are some opportunities. Many ecosystems mitigate the effects of floods and drought. I mean, in the sense, much of the floods that we saw in last summer in Kodagu and in Kerala is because we altered the various ecosystem structure, whether it is deforestation, rapid urbanization. So all this will cause effects in terms of the floods. So there is essentially you have to have the ability to manage these type of things, incorporate them in terms of the. So broadly speaking, we talk about these ecosystem services contribute to wastewater treatment, because these natural systems like the wetlands and all those things have an ability, often sometimes you call it carrying capacity or assimilative capacity, have the ability to deal with treatment of some of the waste products that are produced by human activities. That is this one. So they are also, of course, for water suitable for drinking, industry, recreation, wildlife habitat. So all these ecosystem services must be incorporated in an integrated water resources management if we have to follow in the path of sustainable management. So water and ecosystems is briefly giving you some idea to think that there is need for a minimum water flow in the ecosystem for the ecosystem to survive. Just exactly you need 1700 meter cube per year to survive. Ecosystem also has a need for a flow to maintain in the ecosystem. Then of course we talked about this water, food and energy nexus. I mean, although we will not be talking very much in terms of the management of water in terms of agriculture and food generation, but that nexus is there, is central to the sustainable development. We need enough water to grow enough food, to generate the energy that is required, but also for other human needs. But all this has to be done in a way which is compatible with the ecosystem approach. For all three is increasing, and there is no doubt it's water for human consumption is increasing for its municipal and industrial activities. Agriculture, of course, is also, although there are a lot of innovative ideas have been introduced in agriculture now with micro irrigation, drip irrigation in terms of water conservation, but nevertheless, of course, is an important contribution. Is majority, almost 2/3 of the water resources is taken for food security. So there is a whole lot of things that are talked about, in terms of changing diets, economic. Agriculture is the largest consumer of the freshwater resources. There are many countries, particularly you can think of is Israel, which has really done a tremendous job in terms of, is a country which has been landlocked and have with very limited water resources, and they have developed one of the most sophisticated irrigation systems to meet the food security for their country. So between the critical domains require suitable integrated approach to ensuring food security, sustainable agriculture, energy production in terms of the integrated water resources management concepts. And the water and gender, it may not be a serious issue in many developed countries like Canada, US, and Europe, but in India, particularly in rural India, as I mentioned, this is a very important issue because the responsibility of meeting the water needs for the family lies with the women, mothers and sisters, and also provide. So this is an important aspect of that one to keep into consideration, particularly in developing countries, women and girls, primary response management of household water supply, sanitation and health. Fulfilling these roles precludes any other occupation for education because it becomes a full-time job for them. As I have said, read in the newspaper this morning, women lining up in front of the tanker to get the drum full of water, which is given to them every 3 days or 4 days. So it is not a very happy situation. Fulfilling these roles precludes any other occupation for education, insecurity, not having their own sanitation facilities. Addressing the needs of females in relation to water, sanitary and hygiene is a key for achieving gender equity. This appears again in the international, when I talk about the international commitments, this particular aspect is very much emphasized in the principles that they have enunciated for integrated water resources management. How much time? When do you finish? 1 o'clock, is it? Yeah. 1.5 hours is too long, but I'm sorry, I can't help it. So, normally 40-45 minutes lecture is. So then the question is water and financing. In spite of the clear benefits for human development, in many countries, allocation of financial resources for water resource development is meager. Even the last budget that the new present Chief Minister mentioned, you see the allocation for issues related to water, although it occupies one of the most prominent places in human activity, yet it receives the lowest priority in terms of allocation. So this is probably true all over the world, except for a few countries like Singapore, Canada, and other places. But so this has many countries allocate insufficient resources to meet the Millennium Development Goals, which is sort of goals that the international community have come up with for sustainable living. So target for sanitation and drinking water, compared to other major social sectors such as education, health, sanitation, drinking water receive a relatively low priority. There is a lot more allocation done for education and health. This is particularly true in many countries. Improvements in sanitation and drinking water could reduce the number of children who die each year by 2.2 million. These are some of the statistics that are given by the World Health Organization. Huge savings in healthcare costs, gains in productive days can therefore be realized by improving access to safe water and basic sanitation. So finance, we will discuss it a little bit more in terms of the implications of this water being considered as a human right and a social good, as opposed to being considered as a commodity which has a price. I mean, obviously, bottled water industry has grown because it has become a commercialized enterprise. So financing is one of the issues. Then let me try to spend the next half an hour or so, or 20 minutes to talk about some of the issues where we are going wrong, more specifically in this country, and also more specific, even more specific in Bangalore. This is something which is, you heard of this replaced Planning Commission, Niti Aayog, Water Crisis India. This is their information. 60 crore people, that's nearly half of the population. You saw already 21 major cities, including Bangalore, which I showed you before, facing water shortages now. And in 10 years, the available supply may meet only half the demand. So that means even you will not be able to manage the less than half of the demand. About 70% of the resource is contaminated. No wonder you could see that Bangalore lakes are all contaminated, Ganga river is contaminated, all available freshwater resources are contaminated. There's no wonder 70% of the water resources which is readily available is contaminated. It essentially drives home that quality is as important as quantity issues. Quite often, particularly in developing countries, we often refer to quantity issues, how much water is available per capita, but you have to also equally consider the quality issues. India's rank in the water quality index is 120 among the 122 countries where water quality indices has been this one. So it is not a very happy type of situation. Almost 2 lakh people die each year due to water-related diseases. The medical cost of this is very high. This is their, this one. The economic impact of water shortage will be about 6% of the GDP. Of course, these are the Planning Commission or the Niti Aayog people. The human and social cost is difficult to estimate. water harvesting, treatment and recycling of wastewater, public awareness about the value of water should receive the highest priority. There is quite a lot of thinking and talk going on in the country. There are a lot of major initiatives that have been, for example, the Ganga cleanup plan, Ganges, this one which is, although has been there for a long time, at least for the last 10 years, not much is accomplished, but at least we are thinking in that direction. And we have to pay attention. We will talk about this a little later on when it comes to this one. So this is an evaluation of the highest planning body in the country, which directly reports to the Prime Minister, which is very scary in many ways if you look at it. So it's not very comfortable. So when it comes to Karnataka and Bangalore, I mean, I have been associated with some of these issues through my activities, academic activities in various groups here, including Indian Institute of Science. Water, this is a rhyme many of you might have read, water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. This is a sailor lost in the middle of the ocean lamented, because of course he has a lot of water, but he has nothing. Citizens of Karnataka and Bangalore in a similar situation, confronted with polluted lakes, contaminated groundwater, flooding, Kaveri water, Krishna, Mahadayi rivers dispute, a crisis in management. Essentially, that all adds up to this, because we have really not paid any attention how these things have to be managed. We will have opportunity of discussing when we had time to discuss the interstate sharing of waters, what other countries have done successfully, why our model has failed over the years. So we will discuss that one. So essentially, often many people who work in this sector, in water resources management, in many countries, it is always a crisis in management. Sure, there are shortages of water, both in terms of quantity. Sure, we have problems of water quality, but it is the management which has been, is essentially. Because it's such a complex issue, which is diversified in several departments, people making policies in agriculture department, in municipal departments, and in all other, this water plays such an integrative role in many of these type of issues. So the next, Karnataka is the most water stressed state in India. Urban water demand and supply gap is set to widen from 24% in 2011 to 58% in the next 10 years. We have started seeing the science. Nearly 26% of the groundwater area is overexploited, 54% of the geographical area is drought prone. Unfortunately, two important river basins, Krishna and Kaveri, have both reached a point where demand exceeds supply. Just in the last budget, the Chief Minister presented, where there was this proposal to capture all the water in the watershed and rejuvenate all the water bodies which have been polluted, treat all the wastewater that is generated in the watershed, and feed this water into the Arkavati and Dakshina Pinakani, is it, river, something like that, yeah, and which will again feed into Kaveri river. In other words, the natural flow of Kaveri water is minimized or diminished due to upstream activities that are taking place in the area where it originates, and then of course overexploitation of the Kaveri water, bringing water from such great distances to quench the thirst of Bangaloreans. Now this proposal to feed water, which is, so these are the type of management issues you have to deal with. Is it a rational way of doing it, or is there a better way of doing it? The Chief Minister has allocated 50 crores to do this planning, and there are certain issues that we have to discuss, whether all this rational thinking goes into that, or simply, well, this is the way we have been taught in the school, business as usual approach, let us go on doing this one. So this is where we have to draw the line. So the launch of multi-stage stakeholder partnership to manage the municipal water system by a multi-stakeholder platform to address the growing gap between demand and supply, and by identification of innovative demand-side management solutions. If you keep on managing the demand by finding new supply sources, and that's not sustainable in the long run. And then Bangalore water crisis, surface and groundwater depletion, chemical contamination, surface and groundwater, poor wastewater management is one of the most this one, because since we do not have a better way of dealing with the wastewaters that is generated in the city, which is diverted into the water bodies in the city itself. So it has got the dual issues. First, you have not treated the wastewater, which you should have done in a proper way, and then of course that leads to this by diverting them to these water bodies in the city, pollution of the lakes. So this is essentially a crisis in management, poor planning, policy formulation, lack of vision. 700 million liters a day out of the 1,300, 1,400 million liters pumped from Kaveri is unaccounted for. I am sure that Professor Ramakrishna is going to talk about this issue on the non-revenue water issue, unaccounted water issue. Water which has been transported from such a great distance, treated with very a cost, and it's staggering about 50% is lost due to factors that will be controlled better with technology and management. A certain amount of loss is inevitable. Many countries, we have in Canada, the loss is about 10%. The lowest non-revenue water that is lost is in Japan, 7%. All other countries have 10 to 12, 15%, but 50% is totally unacceptable way of dealing with. This is a management issue which has to be. So city's water distribution network in residential areas has been designed for houses with 1 to 2 floors. When I was growing up in Bangalore, there were only 1 or 2 floor this one. Now the city is vertical growth with hundreds of multi-storied apartment blocks, with groundwater table depleting, chemical contamination. The poor is certainly poor urban planning, because when you have built a 50-story complex, knowing fully well that the city water supply will not be able to do it, then the problems will start. It is not one, and the whole suburban Bangalore is consists of all this development, residential apartment complexes. Pumping water from Kaveri in several stages over 110 kilometers. Of course, this has been happening for a long time. As I said, this falls into that business as usual type of approach. Distribution through 70 pumping station consumes 120 megawatts of power daily, and with all the load shedding, scheduled, unscheduled power outages, to use 120 megawatts of power is not one of the best way of managing the resources. Have we looked into the possibilities? What are the alternatives we have, and those type of things. This is Dakshin Kannada. This is district that gets an average of 3,400 millimeters of rainfall, one of the heaviest area. Underground water levels in the district have fallen by 700 feet, 210 meters. Measures to build check dams, stop wastage of rainwater, enrich the underground water. So there is a lot of opportunities that are available in terms of this one. Freshwater lake on fire in the heart of Bangalore. It is unthinkable, because this is a freshwater body, and this fresh water should be used for whatever. This is again the not having properly planned for the urban infrastructure, trying to deal with the wastewater that is generated. You bring the fresh water from Kaveri, pollute it, and dump it into a freshwater body which is already there in your backyard. So this is the type of thing that we have to think about it. So it is a type of. This is another one that you probably, some of you have heard of this, the Koramangala Challagatta Valley, Bangalore, where there is some problems in Kolar and other districts. So the idea is to treat the wastewater from Bangalore and channel it for several kilometers, I don't know how many 100 kilometers or so, in a valley into Kolar and other districts, which to hopefully to rejuvenate the groundwater system. As we know, because of the poor maintenance and management, the sewage treatment plants broke, and then they started just pumping the sewage water directly into Kolar district. And their lakes have started frothing, and these are the obvious management issues. It is not something to be taken care of, because we have already spent crores of rupees building this infrastructure, and then the whole system fails. And this is something which for some time, many of the Kolar lakes or water bodies were also frothing. It seems it was in the newspaper. So we already talked about this plight of women in these two pictures. That's in Ranchi and Chikmagalur. This is many years ago. Collect water from dried up wells or water tankers, drought hit areas. This is the picture tells the story what we are doing in terms of managing this resource. So let me now go into a scenario where in the next 10-15 minutes to tell you what conceptually people are thinking globally. I'm not talking specifically about Bangalore or India or anything, globally. There is one group of people who think there is a doomsday in the horizon, maybe by 2050 or 2060 or something like that. This scientist, Von Förster from Vienna, is sort of a prediction in terms of this one. He predicts an abrupt transition in the human population growth to occur in the mid-21st century, that is 2050. Either progressive degradation of the finite resource, in other words, the finite resource starts dwindling, or faster than exponential growth of an increasing resource use efficient population. In other words, as the population the needs becomes more and more as a consequence of the standard of living, the resources is consumed at a much more faster rate by this resource use efficient population. Mostly, of course, he is talking in terms of the urban population, particularly this one. So that's one scenario. Few disputes now that the resource is water, because of course I already mentioned this is in the horizon, not only in countries where there is scarcity of water, but even in countries who are gifted with a lot of fresh water are also thinking so that resource is water, and the most fundamental resource to sustainable human population growth. Of course, this. So this is what if you look at it from a point of view of global population, these are some of the models, how the global population, this is the data, the circle, that is the actual data, that population in terms of numbers. This is a billion, this is 10 billion. These are some of the models that people have played around, how to project the population growth, say 10, 15, or 2050, for example, what will be the population growth. They have taken into consideration all the parameters or the factors that go into how the population growth should be estimated. These are the people who call the demographic type of scientists who do this one. There is a lot, by and large, everyone agrees that the population is growing according to a power law type of this one. It's a non-linear growth, and it is increasing at a much faster rate. This is the population. This is again coming back to this original doomsday type of prediction, is that the global population may reach a critical stage when the water stress issues becomes much more serious. So this is the global water transfer with the time. Water transfer in the sense, water that is taken out of the natural systems, whether it is a river basin, groundwater, freshwater bodies, does not include desalination. This is just the available freshwater resources on the planet. So this is kilometer cube per year, and this is 1950. You see, in a matter of 50 years, the global water transfer with time has increased dramatically. And this is also following more or less a power law type of growth, a nonlinear increase. And so this, coupled with this and the population, is this what often call the human water dynamics, how, to what extent the global water withdrawals and the prospect of population rapidly approaching what I mentioned to you as the doomsday prediction, which the Juan Forrester predicted. The water withdrawal data raises some questions, and at least is something that you have to be thinking about it. Of course, there are pessimists, there are optimists. So you can approach this one in both ways. Purely from an academic discussion, it is worthy to consider these type of implications. So the water withdrawal data raises questions regarding the capacity of the global water system to quench the ever greater number of people. So this is the water withdrawal, 10 to the million cubic meters, cubic kilometers per year. And this is the time scale. Of course, these are all some of the models that are being predicted because the circles are the data points in terms of the water. The sustainable limit is somewhere there at 6 million kilometer cube per year. So when you take that one and then try to portion that one water withdrawal meter cube per capita per year individually for each individual, we started off from about 250. Of course, is much below the 1700 meter cube per second per capita, and they expect that all of a sudden it will increase and then have this so-called doomsday prediction. I want you to think in terms of not as a reality, but simply as a prediction. You know, people who have been working in this area to look at various scenarios, what could happen. Similar to the climate change. We are just seeing the beginnings of climate change, but we have to be prepared for that one. And this is, in that sense, is simply a scenario to think ahead. What are the implications of this rapid increase in population coupled with the rapid increase of water withdrawal from the natural environment. So this is the 2050 doomsday prediction. This is from, you may probably think, although it is an academic exercise, this is probably a pessimist type of, pessimistic way of looking at. One may argue on that basis. No, this is not the way it is going to happen. Okay, let me conclude. The two schools of thought in terms of this human water dynamics. There's the optimists who argue that water conservation measures, in other words, the conservation measures that we are undertaking with all the technologies that are available at our resources, will reduce the non-revenue water, will have better agricultural way of agricultural practices, and improve agricultural water efficiency. And we have desalination. It's something that we didn't talk about it. Many countries, of course, are already using desalination. Much of the Middle East, Eastern countries, and even to some extent Singapore is using some desalination to augment the requirement. So the optimists, and of course we have to be optimistic in this, I think, in spite of this gloomy picture that has been projected, that we will have all the measures like water conservation, better way of dealing with agricultural water use efficiency, desalination, and will meet the demands of the growing and increasing affluent population. This is the optimistic this one. I think often what people think is the man's ingenuity is such that he will be able to cope up with this one should that situation arise. That is the optimistic approach. The pessimist will respond with a gradual approach to sustainable levels of water use. In other words, take corrective measures. Nevertheless, the appearance of power law growth in both population and water withdrawals hints at a regime shift in coupled human water dynamics before the end of the century. Renewable limits of fresh water supply therefore represent one barrier standing between today and doomsday. In other words, a gradual approach. This is the optimistic approach. The pessimist would say there's a much more gradual approach to dealing with the managing the fresh water in a sustainable way is probably more this one. So I think that's about it for this lecture. This is essentially wanted to give you an overall view of what the problem is, and as we go along, that we'll deal with some of the success stories, and also, of course, we'll deal with some of the not so successful stories. Okay, thank you. 1.5 more is okay. Yeah, go. Yeah. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Any questions are welcome. So I have a question.
You can ask questions afterwards also when we are having coffee or we're having lunch or when we meet face to face somewhere. Feel free to ask any questions. I may not have all the answers, but I will try to explain.
What may be the right cause for the global disasters, and what would be the remediation or preventive measures for the global disasters, like flooding and...
Well, I mean, you see, it's not something that you can plan in a global scale, because this particular issue, water is such a difficult resource to manage, because in almost all the countries, water is a, what we call a state or a provincial responsibility. Even the central government cannot really make, even if you think that they can come up with policies, but the way of execution, managing the nitty-gritty of this one has to take place at the much lower level. Of course, also this global type of implication, it's simply a perspective on what is happening. But as we have seen here in this country, this issue is becoming worse and worse day by day. I know often we don't, some of us who are fortunate or have more than 100 liters per day, but there are a lot of people who have only 25 liters per day or much less. A drum of water, even if it is 100 liters for a week, is not an... so there is issues of this type, so it has to be managed at the level in which the human interaction takes place. Any amount of policies, if they are not properly implemented, it's not going to do any. We'll explore some of these issues as we go along. Yeah.
So I have a question. I'm curious to know. We all know that Vrishabhavati river is the only river which flows in Bengaluru. So as you have seen, was it the same when you were here?
No, I have a very vague idea. Vrishabhavati Valley essentially joins the...
now what we call as Kengeri Mori.
That particular aspect I have not really had any this one.
So because we feel that is one of the most, the best example for mismanaged water resource. I thank you, sir, for a wonderful session on introduction to integrated water resource management. We have the attendance sheet. We have the attendance coordinator, Ms. Hitaishi. The sheet will be with her. Whoever has not signed in that particular sheet, please sign it. And we have lunch arranged for all the participants and the guests in hostel mess. So we'll be moving for lunch shortly, and we'll assemble here by 1:55. 2 o'clock we are supposed to start the session. So 1:55 we'll assemble back.
Yeah, everybody has got the, given the, everybody has received the, no, the CD or whatever.
The registration kit, whoever has not received it, will be near the registration desk. You can collect it before you go for lunch. We'll assemble back at 1:55 after lunch. Thank you.
One